Imagine millions of people glued to their screens, painting faces in raw passion, and letting an entire day spiral into emotional wreckage because 11 strangers lost a game. At the same time, there's a surprisingly large group of people who simply don't care at all. And according to the latest neuroscience, their brains might be wired in ways that make the whole sports obsession feel almost foreign and even a little mysterious to them. Stay with me, because what I'm about to explain will completely transform how you see the sports-obsessed people in your life, and maybe even help you understand yourself a little better. Here's the part almost nobody talks about out loud. Not caring about sports doesn't make you boring, doesn't mean you lack passion, and definitely doesn't mean something is fundamentally wrong with you. But there is something genuinely fascinating happening inside your brain that is completely different from the roughly 60% of Americans who treat sports like the center of their emotional universe. Let's begin with the most obvious question. Why do so many people care so much? Humans are wired as tribal creatures. For thousands of years, belonging to a group was the difference between life and death. Your tribe protected you from predators, helped you hunt, kept you warm, and ensured survival. Sports today? They're essentially modern, high-tech tribes, complete with better merchandise, louder cheering, and bigger screens. When someone watches their team, their brain releases oxytocin, the powerful bonding hormone that makes you feel close to your family and loved ones. It's wild to think about, but their nervous system literally tricks them into believing those millionaire athletes are part of their own inner circle. Now here's where it gets really interesting. People who don't obsess over sports often have what psychologists call lower tribal instincts. Their sense of identity isn't as tightly tied to being part of any larger group. They tend to think more individually and often say things like, "I don't need to belong to something bigger to feel complete." And there is actual research to back this up. A 2019 study found that people with low interest in sports showed way less of that automatic us versus them thinking. In other words, they don't suddenly start hating the other team just because they're not on their side. But the brain science side of things gets even weirder. You know that feeling right before opening a present? That mix of anticipation and excitement? That's dopamine firing in your brain. Sports fans get the exact same rush during every single play, every possession, every unanswered question. It's constant microdoses of anticipation and reward. Studies using fMRI brain scans show that watching your team activates the same reward centers as gambling and other highly compelling activities. And here's the kicker. The uncertainty is what makes it so powerful. You never know if your team will win, and that unpredictability keeps the dopamine flowing non-stop. It's intermittent reinforcement, the most addictive reward schedule known in psychology. The same principle that makes slot machines so effective. The mechanism is eerily similar to other forms of behavioral addiction. Your brain doesn't really distinguish between different sources of dopamine. It just knows it wants more. People who don't care about sports simply don't get that same dopamine trigger from someone else's competition, and it might even be partly genetic. Research from the University of Chicago suggests that variations in dopamine receptor genes can predict how much someone cares about competitive spectator activities. Think about that. Your complete indifference to whether the Lakers win or lose might literally be in your DNA. But there's another important layer. Sports fans experience something called basking in reflected glory. When their team wins, they proudly say, "We won." When it loses, they say, "We lost." Notice the subtle pronoun switch. People who don't obsess over sports are far less likely to make that move. Their self-concept stays steadier and more internal. They don't need external victories to feel successful. Their self-esteem is more stable and less dependent on things completely outside their control. Before the comments section explodes, I'm not saying one way is better than the other. I'm simply saying there are legitimate psychological differences, and understanding them is fascinating. Here's something that sounds almost contradictory. Sports fans often score higher on certain empathy measures. They can genuinely care deeply about other people's struggles, even when those people are strangers wearing their team's jersey. So why don't non-sports people feel that same pull toward athletes? It comes down to something psychologists call empathy allocation. We all have a limited capacity for caring deeply about things. Sports non-fans often direct that empathy toward completely different places: social causes, personal relationships, creative projects, or intellectual challenges. A 2021 study found that people with low sports interest scored way higher on openness to experience and love of art and beauty. They're getting their emotional highs from art, music, nature, and big ideas. Their brains are chasing the same reward: connection, transcendence, meaning, but they're finding it somewhere else entirely. And let's be honest about something else. For some people, not caring about sports is actually a defense mechanism. Maybe they were bullied in gym class. Maybe they felt excluded by the loud, aggressive culture of sports fandom. Maybe they just never understood why grown adults scream at televisions over a ball. Or maybe you simply find it boring. Both explanations are completely valid. But here's the part that explains so much about why sports fans and non-sports people sometimes can't understand each other. It all comes down to how you experience meaning. Sports fans find meaning in narrative: the underdog story, the comeback, the dynasty, the rivalry. It's compelling because it feels real, unpredictable, and full of genuine stakes. People who don't care about sports often find that same randomness meaningless. They think, why would I emotionally invest in an outcome I can't control, performed by people I don't know, in a game that doesn't actually affect my own life? They're not wrong. They're just looking for meaning in a different direction: a novel, a relationship, a creative project, or a scientific discovery. Here's what researchers call parasocial investment versus direct engagement. Sports fans build one-sided emotional relationships with teams and players. Non-sports people prefer to invest their emotional energy where there is real reciprocity, where their care actually matters to the outcome, and they are active participants instead of passive spectators. Neither approach is superior. They're just two different strategies for navigating the human need for story and meaning. Psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who studied optimal experience, found that flow states, those moments of complete absorption and joy, can be achieved through countless activities. For some people, it's watching sports. For others, it's literally anything else that fully engages them. And here's what's really interesting. People who don't obsess over sports often report feeling more present in their own lives. They're not spending 3 hours every Sunday experiencing someone else's struggle. They're deeply engaged in their own reality. There's something quietly radical about that kind of focus. So what does all this mean? If you don't care about sports, you're not missing out on some fundamental human experience. Your brain's reward system, your tribal instincts, your empathy allocation, they're all calibrated differently. And that's perfectly okay. The next time someone asks, "Did you see the game?" and your genuine answer is, "I couldn't care less," remember, you're not broken. You're not boring. You're just playing a different game. One that might just maybe have higher personal stakes. Want to understand your brain, your friends, and the world in a whole new way? Subscribe to my channel right now so you never miss an episode like this one. Each week I break down the psychology, neuroscience, and hidden reasons behind everyday life, from sports obsession to quiet people, and everything in between. Turn on the bell icon so you're notified the second a new video drops. Let's grow this community together and keep exploring what makes us human. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.